Welcome to Flipped Classroom. Today's lesson is on compound sentences. A compound sentence is made up of two or more sentences, independent clauses. There are three ways to connect them, using a coordinating conjunction, a semicolon and transition word with a comma, or just a semicolon. Let's start with looking at the coordinating conjunctions. The best way to remember them are fanboys, for and nor, but or yet so. Here are some examples. I have strength, so my family relies on me. As you can see, there's two independent clauses. I have strength, my family relies on me. And the coordinating conjunction is so. I have empathy, for I can walk in other people's shoes. With my telepathy, I can guess what happens next, and I warn people. So as you can see also from this example, I went to school, and I saw my best friend crying. Make sure you always add the comma before the coordinating conjunction. Another strategy is to link two independent clauses, both sentences, with a semicolon. My superpower is strength, semicolon. Joe's superpower is empathy. As you can see, these two sentences, these two independent clauses, have been connected with a semicolon. Keep in mind that you'll need to use a lowercase for the second independent clause. Here's an example. Go to school. Do not complain. When you connect them with a semicolon, you need to change the D from an uppercase to a lowercase. The third strategy is using a semicolon with a conjunctive adverb, which also is known as a transition plus a comma. The conjunctive adverbs serve like bridges between sentences. So going back to the example we used in the previous slide, go to school. Otherwise, do not complain. Notice the location of the semicolon and the comma. Again, you will also have to use lowercase for the second independent clause, the second sentence. And here's some examples. It is, I have strength, therefore I am strong. I have empathy, consequently, I can walk in other people's shoes. With my telepathy, I can guess what happens next. Nevertheless, I never warn people. In all these structures, there's a semicolon, conjunctive adverb, and a comma. So these are the three ways you can connect two sentences, two independent clauses: coordinating conjunctions, conjunctive adverbs, and semicolons. And with all of them, they involve either commas or semicolons. You notice throughout this presentation, I've used the phrase sentences, connecting two sentences. For example, dogs get hungry, they eat meat. It is more accurate to call them independent clauses. Though they look like sentences because they have a subject and a predicate, an independent clause doesn't have to start with a capital letter, and it doesn't have to have an end mark like a period. So let's look at these examples. He has strength, my family relies on him. Those are sentences because they begin with a capital letter and they end with an end mark, a period. If I use he has strength, my family relies on him, now I am using a lowercase and no end mark. That's what would make it an independent clause. So when would I use an independent clause instead of a sentence? Let's look at these examples. He has strength, so my family relies on him. In this case, because it's the second part of the sentence, the M would be changed to lowercase. It's an independent clause. He has strength, my family relies on him. In the other example with the semicolon, again you'd use lowercase. And in the third example with the conjunctive adverb, he has strength, therefore my family relies on him. In all those cases, you are connecting two independent clauses. They look like sentences, but they're actually the correct term when you get rid of the period and you change the punctuation is independent clause. So let's look at some samples that'll show up on tomorrow's test. The orchestra, if we're combining the two sentences, the orchestra stopped playing, the dancers sat down. Notice I call them sentences because they have uppercase letters to begin with and end marks, period. To use a coordinating conjunction, I'd say the orchestra stopped playing, comma, so the dancer sat down. With just a semicolon, the orchestra stopped playing, the dancer sat down. And with a conjunctive adverb, the orchestra stopped playing, consequently, the dancers sat down. Keep in mind, the semicolon precedes the conjunctive adverb and then has a comma. Here's another example from tomorrow's test. No one in the audience noticed the loud crash. It sounded like part of the movie. In the first sentence, in the first example, I use a coordinating conjunction that has a comma. In the second example, I use the semicolon. And in the third example, I use the semicolon, conjunctive adverb, and comma. All three are ways of combining two sentences. Here's another example from tomorrow's test. He remembers the day war was declared, is sentence 1. General DuPont says he was in his parents' kitchen. That is sentence 2. When you combine them, remember they're called independent clauses now because you're going to change to lowercase unless it is a proper noun. He remembers the day war was declared. 4. General DuPont says he was in his parents' kitchen. In this case, you would remain capitalized because General DuPont is a proper noun. And you'll see the same with the example with the semicolon and with the conjunctive adverb. It remains capitalized if it is a proper noun. So in review, you now know what a compound sentence is. It's when you're combining two independent clauses, and there's three strategies: using the semicolon alone, using the coordinating conjunction, using a comma, and the third strategy is a conjunctive adverb using the semicolon and comma. And remember, when you change them from two sentences into one, they're called independent clauses. Don't get too hung up on the phrases compound sentence, coordinating conjunction, conjunctive adverb. That's not the important takeaway from this lesson. What's important to know is where does the comma go and where does the semicolon go? How do you properly use a semicolon? Thank you for joining me today in Flipped